online, and we're grateful for your attendance, even if you're watching later. Feel free to ask questions. We're focused today primarily on what we call a digital world town hall meeting, where we go through advancements over the last week, as well as any kind of general questions. We actually have Terrence Waller, they're actually on and can help. The primary topic of this is to focus in on advancements as well as general type topics and questions. This is a private membership association. There are some forward-looking topics around a crazy model, which most of you already know, connected to decentralized, and then a new ecosystem for humanity, where we can work together owning our own data and systems based upon this structure. So thank you for taking the time to show up. Some of the advancements are going to be found online, so you can see them here. And this is actually a full new site from the main site of the different content inside of it to the messages. They're messages that are already similarly understood, but modification advancing the goals and objectives for the digital world. Those are new. That is basically helping to build a digital world that has digital nations. And what we'll talk a little bit about is some of the nations are actually coming on. These are full nations that have actually already had their own infrastructure, their own services. When I say services, I'm talking about things like identity, licenses, notary, passports, financial systems. Maybe that ties to currencies, maybe criminal systems, or dispute systems tied to dispute resolutions or reputation or forensics, all built in. One of the things I want to talk about as well is kind of the events as that's coming up before we wrap up. But these are all new systems you should be seeing here. So the look, the feel, the design, the login, all of the site. The declar is consistent. The councils are all consistent. One thing that will be advancing is each digital nation, as it signs up, will be able to have its own councils, which communication and systems can all basically be local to that nation. So that may be a new topic that folks haven't realized prior, but imagine the digital world is not the governing entity, it's actually the local nation that's the governing entity based upon a digital world architecture and really cryptography systems. So without further ado, it's really just jumping into some of these features and functions, which we'll go ahead and do now. Before I do so, are there general questions that anyone may have, or thoughts or comments? I'm going to make sure that folks can, so we're not streaming there. The one we're streaming on here. Oh, let's go ahead and turn this on.
Where are you today, Michael?
In a wonderful part of the world called Vanuatu. It's actually really hot. It's been a very big eye-opener for me personally, as most of you have worked with me know that kind of an A-type personality, focused heavily on results and continuing to push hard. And this ecosystem has had me slow down. And another way to phrase it is kind of slow down and smell the roses. For instance, the meeting that we just had, one of the reasons we're a little tardy today is we met with the CIO of the country. And just to get this one particular meeting, it took weeks and weeks. And from the ecosystem that we're used to working in, slowing down like that is not common. But Vanuatu is the part of the world that we're currently in. Other parts of the world, Tuvalu will actually be next week. And wonderful countries that are similar to these types of ecosystems, which we'll be announcing It's not just Vanuatu and Tuvalu, but there'll be others that we'll talk a lot about and kind of review. For those that are interested and want to kind of see parts and steps along the way, this is a Digital World Forum, which is actually March 28th. $17.99 includes a phone as well as 15 days of a cruise that goes from, really starts in Australia. It goes through to these stops here. So New Caledonia, Vanuatu, which is where I currently am, Fiji, different parts there, Samoa, different Samoas, and then French Polynesia. So a lot of different ecosystems there. So if you can make it, this would be a wonderful opportunity to connect in person. If not, there'll be other opportunities in the future as well for physical connection as well as the digital ecosystems. So there'll be good times. It's not just, all great food and great company, but we'll actually have some wonderful events where we go into the different ecosystems of physical stores and actually use digital transactions to then make an experience where we actually give away different nodes and basically have a lot of fun with it. So these are some prior speakers that we had on prior events, which you can see, and I'll go ahead and drop this inside of the actual meeting, this particular one. I'll go ahead and drop that in there if you'd like to actually understand what it is. So does that answer your question of location?
Yes, sir. Very exciting.
So I know we've talked a lot about it, and it's been a long time coming, but that's basically that. One thing that you'll see between this week and next week is actually the topic of these digital nations. And in between governance and councils, you actually see a new tab that'll pop that's under nations. And then it will be listing some of the different digital nations as they're lighting up. There's actually a certification program for them. And we'll be identifying 3 different phased rollouts of regions. So where are they initially targeted? And really it's going to be a piece of it. It's going to be a blanket invitation with a select few founding digital nations. So these digital nations will basically have services like these we talked about, and they may have their own services. Maybe they're just going to use 20% of these. Maybe it's just around identity. Maybe it's just around communication. Maybe it's just around land management. But these different services, the country will actually light up its own infrastructure that's similar to what you already see with the digital world. But it will be using the cryptography infrastructure underneath it for all of them. And so everyone in the world will actually have consistent cryptography and digital communications and platforms underneath, but they'll have their own relevant services for their own citizens. So whether it's, ABC Digital Nation that offers XYZ services, they can be unique to those different countries or nations. So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense as this continues to materialize. Some of the other things you may have seen are access for, I'll go ahead and click here. This will basically tie you into third-party sites. And right now you'll see within Google, there's the Digital Life application. You'll also see other applications starting to go into these third-party platforms such as Google. And I don't know if you were on over the last couple of weeks, but there's also other ones that may tie to other devices, so other manufacturers. So with that being said, any other topics, questions, thoughts, comments?
Hey, Michael, it's back. How you going?
Life is good. It's good to hear your voice.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for the update. I wasn't on last week. I'm not too sure if there was a meeting, but thanks for your update. And I just wanted to ask, I saw the Starlink photo that you put up on your Facebook, which was pretty exciting. Is there anything that you can provide on that?
So Starlink has been tested in multiple different regions, namely up to 4 different regions. And we're actually working directly with SpaceX to roll out in certain regions services that will be an umbilical cord to these different ecosystems. A lot of folks would say, well, if this is so advanced and decentralization is so important and this technology works so well, why don't you roll it out with some of the bigger countries that already have the infrastructure? And the reality is there's an element and a phrase called the last shall be the first and the first shall be the last. And there's a lot of truth to that, not just because of the people and their hearts and their open minds and their willingness to understand really decentralization at its core, but they already live it. They already have lived it for their survival. And a lot of these countries, for instance, one that I'll go to next week, the whole country runs off of one connection, one umbilical cord. And when you talk about Starlink, it can bring other umbilical cords. For instance, in their waters, there's over 1 million square kilometers of ocean. And it's not just flat water or the fish in the ocean, which they look at as an asset, the salmon and the halibut and other things are exports and goods, but it's actually what can float on them. And in the future, there will be cities and towns and countries and governance that will not just tie to physical land, but also tied to water. And when we talk about water and land, we're really talking about the earth, and we're really talking about a governance system in the digital world that can actually span not only what humanity has historically known as water law or common law, but a combination of the two where people can self-select and actually be a part of a new ecosystem, a member of a new ecosystem, a citizen of a new ecosystem. And I'll be specific in kind of how that breaks out here. So this shows you, you can be a member of the digital world or a resident or a digital citizen, but then you can also be a physical citizen. And that physical citizenship is what ties to these new nations that are going boarding process currently. Like the meeting that we just had is very interesting to see the light just turn on and for folks to say, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And we innately already see it and understand it. And in many ways have been waiting for that to be realized and actually to start coming to fruition. So most of these different pieces and parts of the world, the umbilical cord to connect to them is really the weakest link. And so Starlink provides a possible solution to that. And then as they basically stand up and start rolling these systems out, their countries are basically fertile ground to start a process on, how do you accept an identity? How do you accept a payment? How do you receive a payment or an identity? These are all new processes that they're starting with, and so it's very easy to basically pick up in these ecosystems. And to be honest with you, a lot of people may think, well, these people aren't smart. They haven't rolled this out. They haven't figured it out. And I would say that in many ways, they're actually blessed because they haven't rolled certain things out. Their society hasn't been overtaken by a digital social ecosystem, whether we're talking about social networking, social platforms, social media, games. They still are free within their lives and their time and their livelihoods. And when you start layering on additional income streams that could be realized, like look at, just delivering a digital identity is going to have a revenue stream. Delivering digital notarization is going to have a revenue stream. Digital marriage, dispute resolution, the ability to get passports and immigration, land management, titles, wills. These are all services that can actually drive revenue in an ecosystem that's standing up from day one. It's interesting to see how many people just come out of the woodwork and say, I want my first phone, or I want my first bank account. Not because I trust the banks, but because I know this new decentralized digital ecosystem is actually something that I'm personally accountable for. And when they start understanding these simple vocabularies around decentralization and key management in 12 words, it's actually less complicated to roll that out than it is to start understanding passwords and password management and this system with Apple and that system with Google and this system with Docs. It's actually easier for them to roll out in these types of infrastructure. And Starlink is really one of the technologies that will enable that in a very large way. Now, that being said, it's got to be rolled out in a responsible way, so we're not just bringing a lot of darkness and a lot of negative content into these different ecosystems of people that are just pure in heart. You know, the ego, it's very limited here. Guile, it's very limited. Pride, very limited. These are the right environments to start with, where people really value connection and relationships. And not only that, they don't have to send an uncle or a brother or a child off to another part of the world to be able to make $3 an hour and send $2 an hour home, and then have Western Union or whatever other payment processor take a chunk of that income that they worked hard for. So hopefully Starlink and others can continue to bring in a accountable infrastructure for these special parts of the world. And hopefully leadership in these special parts of the world continues to see the importance and value of really not just decentralization, but the cultures that they've built. A lot of these cultures morals are really important to them. Virtues are really important to them. Principles are very important to them. You know, one of the topics that came up earlier today was around marriage. And they said, well, what if you have a man that wants to marry a man? How does that work? Because they are concerned around getting involved in marriage. I said, if you're rolling this out within your country, you can determine how you want that to happen. And some countries, you know, the rainbow is there and it doesn't matter. And it's just love everywhere. In other countries, particularly the one that I'm in right now, Vanuatu, that's foreign. You know, it's still a man and a woman is what makes up a culture. And when you start bringing in the digital ecosystem where and it's not just a digital ecosystem. I mean, you've got it throughout humanity, but it's really each country can create its own guidelines as to how they want to roll these things out. Some countries, you know, like in Israel, that's not going to be a reality. In Utah actually does a lot of same-sex whatever. You know, the other side of it is how do people identify? Do they have is there a new name? Is there a new, you know, so those are all topics that came up this morning around a concern around deploying digital marriage as a service. And we basically said, hey, you can make your own rules. And so the goal is as technology just gets deployed, it can also be accountable based upon a jurisdiction. And, you know, each country can have its own jurisdiction, and then anybody can actually self-select to say, I want to be a part of a different jurisdiction. Right now, the barriers to that are very difficult to overcome. So for instance, let's say someone within one country that wants to go to another country, but they can't get a visa for that other country. You know, in an ecosystem like this, they can actually provide value where they locally are, and then traverse to a different jurisdiction that may have access on a visa standpoint to these other countries. And it's going to take time, but ultimately what we're talking about is rolling out identity that is actually tied to encryption keys, where the individual owns the encryption keys instead of centralized systems actually managing them. So I hope that makes sense to folks, and if not, feel free to ask any kind of question around it. But the images that have been posted, go ahead.
It's Terence in Australia here. I was talking with just on the technology side with Starlink, talking with a friend the other night, and he's telling us about associates of his that are doing video conferencing out there in the middle of the Pacific on a boat, and they're getting 240 megabits a second via Starlink for the download, and possibly similar on the upload. So that technology is seems to be opening up the Pacific, and definitely provide good infrastructure for places like Tuvalu. So it's working out there. It's definitely working, and their hardware is also on half price at the moment. So you can buy like an RV unit and put it on your boat, and subscribe month by month, or cancel it if you want per month. And they've got the RV unit on sailing boats out in the middle of the Pacific.
Yep, I've actually personally tested that, and it does work well. It's amazing, and it really changes a lot of how society has congregated inside of cities, inside of buildings, inside of condo and buildings. And, all of us have 24 hours a day. Some of us have figured out how to add value to society within 4 hours of those, some 8 hours, some multiple jobs within more than that. But then they still want to live a life and kind of see the world or be a part of the world, instead of just saying, hey, I live in this state and I'll die in this state, versus, we're all born on this planet and we can be a part of the planet. So there are really cool new types of, and I'll see if I can find it real quick. I'll pull up one that's called Storyline. So this is actually, I think it's here. So for instance, I have a buddy who spent, at the time when he started this, it was about 300,000. Now they're up to 600,000-700,000, something like that. But you see these residents, so this is kind of a community that's at sea. So people basically buy into a 1-bedroom flat, or maybe a 4-bedroom place, and something in between, that they actually become a part of others. I'll do this later. And so this boat, you basically buy for the lifetime of the boat a room or more, or you can buy a percentage of a room. Imagine if that room is actually cryptographically purchased and shared as an asset. Imagine if where this boat goes and how it moves around the world, if it's actually something that can be, and you'll notice, so this is actually in the Pacific, but where they're initially starting is not in the Pacific. And this actually won't hit until 2025. So here, I'll show you an example of an itinerary. So this is over in Europe. I want to say it's Greece and Italy is where this first one will actually hit. Yeah, so there should be a map that pops up. But you can see that, this is over in Europe. This is where a lot of the ships are made. France, and some of the best. There should be a map. Let's see if I can. No, not seeing it. But here's an example of different residences that are for sale. So this is, the current pricing is 875,000 up to 8 million. But think about it. How many of you spent 500 grand on a home or 300 grand on a home? And this basically provides a similar type work environment where you can work during the day because of that connectivity, and show up somewhere else, so to speak. So it's a good example of how the world is changing. And then a lot of people are like, okay, well, what's the governance that actually governs this type of living? Where are the citizens? They actually have a home on a boat. That boat traverses different countries, whether it's the Middle East, whether it's Europe, whether it's the Pacific. They literally bought and I really want to try and get that itinerary up so you can see. Oh, hopefully it loads up now. Yeah, here we go. So you can see this is just one stint of a leg. So they kind of start over by Turkey, go down by Greece, all the way up, and then through Italy. Some people would say, hey, I want to actually do this. Other people are like, you know what, I'd want to see a different part of the world. Other people are like, you know what, I'd love to just see the whole world. And instead of buying a home in a certain, let's say in Brisbane or in Taipei or in, Salt Lake, you can literally own a home, but it's a resident that is actually on a boat. So imagine the governance that's going to tie to this. For instance, what tax jurisdiction do they live in? Are they a citizen of the world? Are they a citizen of a boat? Are they how does it all work? And so basically imagine rolling out some of the principles that we talk about within the digital world tied into an ecosystem like this within a physical life of where you've actually. So let's jump to, I don't want to go crazy here. This one, I haven't ever looked at this one, but let's look at this one, what they call Encore. So this is a 3-bedroom estate, crazy amount of money, but you can kind of see, you have all your own amenities and comforts of what you would have on land, but instead of walking through, a city, you'd really see a new city every other day. So this will become a reality. This ship will actually be done in 2025. And this is actually, I know this might sound crazy, but this ship here is actually a very small ship for what is coming in the future. And when you start talking about these simple countries of Vanuatu and Tuvalu and Fiji and Samoa and Tonga and Rarotonga and Atutaki and Aotearoa, all these different countries represent destinations for these new communities that will look for a new jurisdiction on how to spend, how to live, how to be. Right now, this event that we're going on here, when we talk about this event here, where we're spending 15 days, this ship, today, there may be some dialogue around a digital asset, but any of these different ship cruise lines actually has a rewards program, a loyalty program, a payment process, a way to hold and store value. They also have vendors. As a matter of fact, I'm sitting here with a vendor today. If you want to get involved, you can. I can show you. This individual, not just a vendor, he's a friend. He's a brother. He's an amazing father, an amazing example to me. I think we're both learning as we get to know each other over the years, but he's actually got a clear shirt on, but I won't show it to you right now. But he's a wonderful man that actually helps people that get off on ships, and they want to see the land of Vanuatu and the waterfalls and the pools and the people and the fruits and the vegetables and the lifestyle that's different. Today, how do they accept money? Is it just based upon a currency within a particular country that some other country actually created, like these? Or is it through a process that some system capitalized, like? Or is it a combination of all of it where it's a digital asset? And imagine we're talking about creating new digital communities and new digital nations in a new digital world. That all is basically held by the individual of an encryption key. So for those of you that are, when you get your phone, you basically get a piece of paper like this where you write down your encryption key. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. It's actually been very eye-opening for me to see some people that are just barely getting their first phone and how writing an encryption key down is not foreign. Now, the question is, can they actually keep it, hold on to it? What happens if they lose it? Will they understand the importance of it, really? Will they understand how to rebuild it, really? So you can go ahead and take those, by the way. Have those. I hope this is making sense, but it's a new ecosystem. So these events that we're doing with the digital world are really something that can show the proof of something like this in the future. Today, can you actually own these cruise ships? No, but these types of systems there are. You got 20 restaurants, 10,000 books of physical books. You've got you can actually meet people online before you even come together in the physical world. This is it's a new way of living. And I want to make something very clear. This storyline or ships are not why the digital world was created. The digital world is a system for the future of humanity, really for a new millennium where the individual is actually connected, not to just a government, but to a system that all of us own and all of us can be a part of. So I'll stop blabbing with that. I know we got started later, but any other questions or thoughts, comments, feedback?
Yeah, I was wondering when you were talking about, this is Stephen. The countries that are adopting this new digital existence or world, does that mean they will be creating their own digital currencies?
That is the intent, yes. Next week.
So it won't be go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I just didn't know whether there was going to be a common one between different countries or each country's individual, or how's that work?
Well, that's the beautiful part of it. In the digital world, like if I scroll down here, anyone can basically log in and they can create their own digital companies and their own digital assets and their own digital payments with it. So imagine an ecosystem where every country has its own currency, just like it does today, but the currencies can actually transfer into one another in real time without expensive costs, like what humanity already sees. And instead of having a physical currency like this, it's just a digital representation of the currency, but it's still their own currency. So just like,
So this is really future, looking forward in the future, because most of these people don't have cell phones, right?
Well,
I mean, in a lot of the
you would be amazed, like the gentleman that I'm sitting with right now, and even others, they don't have a bank account. Never have. They don't have a Visa. Never have. There's only one bill that they worry about paying, and it's their cell phone bill. And it's not even a regular bill. As it's used, they go and get more. And that's it. It's just that simple. This, the way of life, on one hand, it's refreshing. On the other hand, it blows my mind. They have all the food that they need. They have all their, I haven't seen a happier culture. I haven't seen more smiles. I haven't seen more kindness in my life, ever. And I've been around the world. I've seen amazing people and hearts in India. I've seen, and I'm an American, and most Americans have been painted this ugly picture of Russia, of this dark, cold, dirty, nasty, mean culture and people. And it's just the opposite. But the smiles and the freedom that I see within these simple cultures and villages and hearts is nothing like I've ever seen, especially in Fiji. I've never, so, but imagine all of these different, and we talked about this with certain key members of a prior meeting today, around those who create money own the systems. He that creates the money makes the rules. And so if you enable a country to create its own money based upon its own policy, and you remove the complexities and barriers of the technology behind it, that's what innovation is, what can actually change the future. Yes, we've got this beautiful new system. And don't get me wrong, Starlink is not the first technology to bring internet to humanity, but it is at scale. It is at scale. I mean, there are other cellular providers, there are other satellite providers that provide that last mile of connectivity to individuals that live in a simple village and live a simple life, and I would say are actually happier and more purpose-filled and more connected to our Creator than those in the most perceived wealthiest countries. Because remember, wealth is actually created. You can't buy happiness. So I'll stop blabbing with that, but hopefully I answered your question, Steve, that yes, the option is for these different countries to go and create their own assets and digital assets. Maybe they're going to tokenize, cacao bean or a certain type of root, maybe kava. In this particular country, that's one of the things that the world likes from here is kava. Maybe, and this is a conversation I had earlier this week as well. The export from this particular country is actually not kava or papaya or salmon or halibut or anything that's physical. It's actually humans. I believe that families are created here, names, hearts, brothers, sisters, fathers, uncles, mothers, and the next thing you know, they're taken to another country because the economy locally, the leadership, and don't get me wrong, the leadership here I think is second to none on multiple levels, especially when it comes to the spirit and their hearts. And by the way, yesterday was President's Day around the world. Here in Vanuatu, it's what they call Leadership Day, which is not, it's not a president, because they don't look at a man over others. They look at really a tribe with a chief that has councils that serve others. So not by dictation. And that's why decentralization is something that just, especially with Vanuatu, it's a part of their constitution. It's written in their constitution that decentralization, specifically that word, is actually something that they already had even before we came. So the biggest export is actually people. Why? Because their economy, their currency, their assets are looked at in developing worlds, whether it's a third world, second world, they're looked at in a different way. And so their income levels based upon the cost of living is off balance. And so you actually have people that can't make enough money locally, so they have to go externally. So you're literally taking people that are born in Vanuatu to a field in Australia, to a field in New Zealand, to a field in the Philippines, and they're working for $3 US an hour to send it home, to be able to live on 70 cents an hour and send $2 homes, which Western Union takes, their 12 cents of. So it just continues, it continues to create separation, just like the languages of these islands. So in this particular Vanuatu, there's 83 islands and there's over 50 dialects of different tones. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so I mean, you think about it, you divide the people by dividing their language, their words. But as humanity is coming together, and technology is another thing that's bringing it all together, the words are coming together. The languages are coming together. For instance, I was talking about India. I was talking about, even Saudi Arabia or Russia. These are all cultures that are very different cultures from religion to language, but yet they're really the same. I was able to travel to all of them, and we all talk about a single creator, and we all talk in one single language with translators. So for instance, next week, I'll go to Parliament for a week, and I will listen through translators what is being said and helping to draft really the future. And the future does tie to potential currencies. Now, it's their choice. They don't have to do it. They can continue to do it the old way, but eventually they're going to understand that, there's actually a revenue stream and a payment system that can be real time. And if we can do a real-time transaction without any cost or very minimal cost, like a thousandth of a cent, and no government and no bank in the middle of it, and they can actually manage it on how it's actually created with the exchange side of it, there's a future there for them to actually govern themselves and to manage themselves. So, but, you know, not all of them. For instance, Tuvalu has a currency, its own currency, but it's pegged to the Australian dollar. Vanuatu has its own currency, and it actually has its own floating rate that has a foreign exchange rate that floats independent of any currency. So it's not pegged to another dollar like Tuvalu is. But Fiji, same type of thing, you know. But they'll all make their own policies, and the goal is to let everyone make their own policies and structure, but have a governance system where identity can be consistent, where value exchange, the medium under it, can actually be consistent. Maybe the foreign exchange rates may be variable, but the system will actually work without money changers in the middle of it. And I use that word money changers in a very deliberate way. So, which is a whole nother conversation. But did I answer your question okay, Steve?
Yeah, that was great. I just, it's like I say, that's even if they don't do it right now, that's still something they'll be looking at in the future. And as the community develops, it would be easier to introduce it, I would think.
That's right.
And so it's like just getting things set up. And in the smaller countries like this, it's easier to work with the government because the government isn't so cumbersome.
Yeah.
So I can see where as different nations come on board, then it'll be easier to make that next step.
That's right.
It sounds exciting. It really does.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right. You know, it's very different work and effort than I've ever experienced personally. And I know that there's a lifetime worth of work ahead of it, but I don't know about you, but with society and where it currently is, what are the things can we be doing that could have more of an impact for future generations? You know, and that's...
Well, it's kind of like you're in a race against the community, centralized community that wants to have, what do you call those, passports and all this kind of stuff, where each country can have control of their own destiny and not have to tap into something that they have to opt into a digital wallet. I mean, a digital passport and stuff.
That's exactly right.
And that's what it looks like to me. So it's like an urgency also involved there.
Yeah, the World Economic Forum and the WHO, the health organization, you know, these ecosystems have basically all worked with other systems like the World Fund System, whether you're talking about central banks or the IMF. These systems all are centralized systems, and they're rolling out identity systems, and they are shifting to a digital ecosystem that will combine three things: the digital world, the physical world, and the biological world. Biologics being our DNA, who we are. You know, it's not just looking at someone's face to identify them, but actually looking at the DNA MIPS that come off of a swab, like a PCR test that came off of a COVID test. So the biological world, the physical world, and the digital world will all come together with these different organizations. And if you haven't been paying attention to what's going on out there, and I'll pull it up here real fast, if I can. Let's see if I can. I'll just pull up. Here's an example. Oh, that's not the right one. This is it right here. So there was a document that was signed by a certain administration that basically gave access to the World Health Organization. And this started about a year plus ago. But if you notice, today is February 21st. Actually, in the part of the world I'm in, it's the 22nd. But on the 18th, this news basically popped out, which is one step closer to where the World Health Organization, an organization out of Geneva, okay, will basically, under a certain type of status. So if let's say that the world says that there's a new pandemic, see this global pandemic, this new pandemic, that this World Health Organization, and this is actually so important that I'll have this read as we wrap up, or I'll tell you what, I'll share a link with you. Please watch it if you can. Or listen to it. But it basically goes through and spells out what I'm talking about, where you have a response that can actually be mandated and dictated from a central ecosystem, namely the World Health Organization can mandate all citizens of certain countries. In this particular article is talking about the United States of America, how the states and the counties do not have a say. And I would argue that the person that actually wrote this policy and bill knows the Constitution of America very well, and intentionally is trying to stir up and go around it so that the counties and the states don't have a say-so. And I don't know about you, but the United States of America, the word United States means the states are independent, and more so, the counties are independent. For instance, this same exact topic, I went to the sheriff in the county that I lived in, and I said, if vaccines were mandated, would you enforce it? And the response was, no, we would not. Not only that, we agree with your perspective of it, which it should not be enforced. But what you read here is basically circumvention of the Constitution, where the individual does not have a choice. And if you do not comply, you will literally be criminally prosecuted. And I'm not just talking a slap on the wrist. These guys, this is taking things to a whole nother level. Is it done?
Well,
Go ahead.
It actually supersedes any law in the land because it's above treaty law, isn't it? And therefore they can waltz in here and put troops on the ground to keep the world safe from people that are not being vaccinated here.
You got it. Yep. And the reality is well, what happens when a new identity system is rolled out, what's really sad is the state that I was in, Utah, is actually leading the charge in this new identity system. Believe it or not, there's a whole nother conversation on that. But Utah, which is, I believe, a very accountable state, but the folks that are leading it today are actually leading blindly the new identity system, which will then tie to the financial system and then tie a consequence to not complying with these types of mandates. So you don't comply to this, it's not only can you lose your physical freedom, but you can also lose, and I've said this before, and you may see it or agree with it, you may not, but I actually believe that we're all imprisoned, we just don't know it because we're not behind bars. But we're all slaves in certain ways. And that's why when you come to an ecosystem like Vanuatu, these individuals have been free for a very long time, but they actually come from roots of slavery. And I would say, don't we all in different ways? But there's a point where we all can have an opportunity to stand up. But we have to select it. We have to actually choose it. And that choice is what's beautiful about all of this. the opportunities to create a parallel path to what the World Health Organization is doing, along with other types of countries, to be able to create a parallel choice, an alternative. So I hope that answers your question, maybe in a little different way, but does this make sense to you?
Well, the whole thing is just a little scary.
Yeah.
But it's where we're at, and it's coming down on us hard and fast. You just see it by what happened to the truckers up in Canada. You see it by how many people have been shut down in this country, booted off Facebook, and just for trying to share what they know to try to keep people safe and healthy. And we've already got it here, but they don't have the means to enforce it like they will have. And I'm battle ahead of us. We'll put some of these people away that have done this because they should.
Yeah.
But that's a heck of a battle, and I keep saying that, but I don't see the people waking up fast enough to stop it.
Yeah.
We're thankful for clear.
But yeah, but we're thankful for clear. That's an add on in the background. And it is amazing how many people are waking up. And I know there's two things that I kind of have gauged this by. And one is, it was rare that you ever heard any mention of the Bible on any broadcast at all. And now it's very commonplace. And I don't know. The other thing is people waking up to the fact that maybe we need a little bit more independence in the food realm. And there's a lot of people starting to grow gardens, learn how to put food aside, buying extra food just as a safety valve. And that's so exciting to see, because that means all of us are in a better position if things do get difficult. So it's headed in the right direction there too, but there's a battle going on.
There really is. And, it's happening in different ways, but I'd say the biggest and most important thing to not lose sight of is it's a spiritual battle.
Yeah.
And
Majorly.
And, and then we'll talk about these different physical battles, but most of us only care if it's an economic thing. And that's what ties to this topic here. This is talking about BRICS, where Saudi Arabia is now looking to basically has joined, or is in the process of joining multiple other countries to basically create an ecosystem where oil can be purchased on the renminbi and other currencies other than the US dollar, which for most that don't understand why the US dollar has actually been the standard for so very long, it's because assets were purchased on that medium. So I believe that this will directly have results in the foreign exchange world. And so if you're tracking any of the foreign exchange stuff, now's the time to start paying attention and maybe start even acting in other ways, which if you're in the foreign exchange world, you understand what I'm saying. But the other thing that's also important is decentralized technology is going to change the foreign exchange world, because you can have value exchange in real time with really no cost. So what's going to happen there? Go ahead. Was there another question or thought?
Well, I was just going to say, what I see happening right now is there's a real push for World War III, and it's not because of the things happening in Ukraine and stuff. I think they feel like they have to hurry things up because people are waking up so fast. Prosecution is coming, and they need a major distraction.
Yeah.
And
I'm not in the US, but can someone provide color as to what's going on with the different catastrophes, whether it's warehouse fires or train wrecks or ship fire? I mean, it's crazy to see all of the different, I wouldn't call them natural disasters, but, and maybe.
How much time do you have?
Well, one thing I can say about the Ohio thing is 30% plus of the organic farms in the United States just went down because of the chemicals. It's an attack on the food. It's the Amish farms that got hit the worst with the chemical
Fallout.
attack, the chemical fallout from the trains. There's an attack on food. I think it was Kissinger said, if you can control the food, you can control the people.
Well, it goes,
And
go ahead.
yeah,
You're spot on.
it's
Keep
just
going.
interesting.
There's more to it.
There's a lot more to it, but we're under attack. And it's not just the United States, I think it's the world,
Yeah.
because it is a spiritual battle.
But that spiritual battle, you know, and of course I'm prejudiced, but I think a lot of it stems around the United States. Just there was a guy helping us with our Clariphone from Australia, and he said, you know, we're praying for you guys because if your light goes out, the world light goes out.
Mm.
And I see that as the truth. You know, we were a godly nation founded on godly principles, and the battle is to take that away, and largely it's been done. But there is a revival happening right now, and that's why I say people are waking up, and that gives me hope. But it's like it's nip and tuck. It's like it's on a teeter-totter, and I just don't know which way it goes. And one way it goes to hell, and the other way it goes to heaven, in the outcome for all of us. You know.
Amen to that. And you're spot on multiple levels. And I really want to touch back on a point that you made earlier, that we're starting to hear more about God. The individual that actually translated what the statement underneath this says, we met with. Wonderful man. But this translates into, just like in America, it talks about being under God. And there's a reason why we call things a piggy bank. If you notice, behind him is actually a tusk of a pig. And yesterday, like I said before, was President's Day. And here they call it Leadership Day. And they tie it to directly both of these topics. But the individual that actually translated this text really goes back to some of the similar topics we were talking about before. You're talking about control the food and you control people. Well, how do you control the food? He who creates the money makes the rules. And if the rules are, do this as far as degradation of food, whether it's through a chemical spill or an explosion, or whether it's through a chicken farm that burns up, or whether it's through feed within the chickens that stops them from laying, just like we stop the food from producing from seed, just like we stop the human from reproducing from a vaccine, which a lot of these things people may have, take massive conflict with that statement. Like there was a gentleman this morning on a feed that said it's not, the numbers of death is still all the same. We're not dying any faster. And I would argue that there's a massive attack on humanity through a needle, which is a different way of war versus missiles or bullets or arrows. But
It's biological.
Exactly, it's biological. But in the end, it's a matter of, will this actually humble us? Kind of like 9/11 did, where I saw America come together.
Yeah.
I saw America stand up for what was right, as far as neighbors, as far as respect, as far as caring, as far as kindness, as far as, we heard less horns, less sirens, probably not down in Manhattan, but throughout America, it truly was united for one of the first times I had ever personally seen it in my life. And I look forward to the opportunity for humanity to grow through choices that are made. I don't think we need go ahead.
Here's another thing that I had not thought of until this last week. And the farmers all over the country faced this when a genetically modified seed blew onto their property, even if it was if they were organic, it didn't matter. if they tested their product on that farm and it was genetically modified by no fault of their own, they lost the right to that seed because it was genetically changed, and the person that had the patent for that seed owned it.
Mhm.
So they couldn't replant it. Well, the scary part is, last week we were thinking about this, and I can't remember where we heard it, but that also applies to genetically modified people.
There was a Supreme Court case in 2013. They ruled that if a person is genetically modified, then they are property of who owns the patent, which is stunning when you think about what the genetically modified, what has happened with the jab, with the bioweapon.
I mean, we've seen people lose their farms over, this stuff, and now there's the potential for more control over people legalistically, and that's just mind-boggling to me.
You know,
We aren't. Go ahead. We aren't there yet, but it's set up to where it could be.
you're exactly right. And you know, these slides that we talk about, secret combinations working to take over governments, both private and public. The alternative to that is decentralization. And when you understand open source versus closed source, that is what actually combats exactly what you were talking about, where it's all about a patent system and infringing on ownership of a patent, which is really what Bayer Pharmaceutical and Monsanto's and others went after when we're talking about genetically modifying plants and vegetables. And now what they're doing is modifying humans, just like they did the plants and the vegetables. But open source versus closed source is actually an alternative to it. For instance, what if people that actually used the existing patent system and went and got patents and then gave them away to the general populace? And then people in the general populace, like the Open Invention Network, that actually takes all these different patents that have been donated and given away, come together to create a legal process to go against the tyranny and the negativity that's out there. And I can tell you that there are wonderful people inside legal systems that are even, imagine folks that have their eyes open that were in the military, that said, I will not get this vaccine, you can terminate me. And these are moral people that stood up and they understand fighting for what's right. And they bind together, they lock arms, and they go through a legal proceeding. And it may take 2 years to go through that process, and there may be war and confusion in between then and now. But ultimately, we all have our own role to play in this, whether it's about advocating for a new type of phone, whether it's about building an ecosystem that, for instance, these folks within the military that are going through a legal process, or whether it's a simple individual saying, you know what, I'm going to start growing a little bit more food, or someone else that says, I'm going to make sure that my family is exposed or not exposed to this type of information or data. I think that's one of the big things is when we talk about some of these problems, notice that one of them, top right corner, big media. Imagine the innuendos and the mentions of maybe it's a sexual this and a bad language that. On the other hand, taking God out of this or God out of that. It's a counterbalance of how the mind works, and our bodies and minds and spirits, and we're just so it's amazing, but it's very impressionable and
Programmable.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. But yeah, so
I mean, TV programs,
It's called
television.
For a reason. Television.
Yeah.
and it puts forward their
Their vision.
but that's Now, I don't know. Did you hear about the Thai princess that went into a coma
I didn't.
in
No.
Thailand?
No.
Well, what it boils down to is there was a professor in this country that wrote about the effects of the vaccine, and he was boycotted, and he couldn't talk anywhere and all that kind of stuff. The Thai princess took I think it was the third shot, and she went into a coma, and the people there were telling I think it's the king, that it was because of a bacterial infection. And there were some advisors that said, you might want to talk to somebody about it possibly tying into the vaccine. And so this guy in the United States, who is still a Thai citizen, went over there and explained the whole thing about how the vaccine, he basically called it a bioweapon. And the princess is probably, sick because of this. And now they're talking about being the first country that will undo the Pfizer contract. And there's a possibility that they will be starting the new Nuremberg trials. All they need is one general to start it. And that's actually in any country where they can start a military court and start checking into this thing for real. And it can't seem to be done in this country. And I think it's because in this country, so many of the key positions have been bought off. So I hate to say that, but it's looking like that. And also Bolivia's got a similar situation. I don't know the details there, but people are waking up, nations are waking up.
You're spot on. What you just talked about, I was also touched on in this article, because Nuremberg is a good example of what's happened. And it's actually where this is all going. But I just dropped inside of the notes a bunch of different videos and that talk about the same topic. Most of you are probably already familiar with it, but that's my mother-in-law calling, so I better wrap up here and jump onto that one. So appreciate all of your time and your love and your prayers. They're felt, they're appreciated. And we'll see you next Tuesday at the same time, probably from a very let me tell her, give me just a quick second.
She's persistent too.
Yeah, she is. Hello, young lady.
Is this mine?
This is. Give me just 60 seconds. Yeah, give me just 60 seconds.
Okay.
I'm just wrapping up a call. Hold on a second.
60 seconds.
Okay.
Okay, well, Shawnee's trying
Nope.
to call me, but when I push the call, the answer's
Okay, I'll wrap up so I can call her back and help her. But thank you all for
We
your.
really thank you too.
You know how
We
it
really,
goes. Say again.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
we
Thanks.
appreciate you.
That goes two ways. Much love, everybody.
Yeah, I really appreciate you.
We're all in this
I'm
together.
screaming out from telecommunications in Australia. Stop being yes men. Stop being yes men.
You know what's interesting in the same room that I'm giving this presentation in, the law enforcement from Australia all left Australia and came here to this very room to
Oh, really?
the federal police there in Australia to basically come up with well, I can't speculate, so I won't, but there were a
Yeah.
lot of folks that were here and
They're looking for solutions.
yeah, so
Well, I'm all about solutions. I work in telecommunications and all we do every day is solutions, solutions, solutions.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm here every Wednesday.
well, thank you for being here and thank you for your support.
Yeah, I
and
appreciate you.
everything. We'll talk to everyone later. We've got the Ripple Effect, the Digital World, and the Town Hall are all three different meetings that will happen at the same time, consistent. So we'll see you next Tuesday. Bye-bye, everybody.